All right, to start with, this chip here is blown. I got it bypassed with a capacitor. It's got to put my glasses on. Okay, it's U6, and it's one of those switchers that routes the signal. And I took a capacitor, same value as what's on the circuit board, and I took it and I bypassed. But this chip could be loading down some of the signal. But with a long aerial, I'm able to get that strong AM station. And as soon as I disconnect the capacitor, it disappears. Okay, and if you go either way, sending a long wire signal into the radio, working backwards, you get to that chip. And if you use the signal generator, you get stopped at that chip. Okay, so I decide I'll bypass it. When I bypass it, it does work, but I'm suspecting that chip is loading the line down. I'll know when I cut that chip out. I have to cut it out in order to replace it. It's not a chip with little pins. It seems to be the type that the pin rolls over underneath. If you understand that, it's a surface mount. I wanted to tell anyone that's thinking about repairing these, the radio does not like the switching supply. If you put the switching supply plug in, you might get a white screen. That means you're going to have to push both these in at the same time. These two rotary wheels are also a switch. You push both them in, and the radio does a reset. Okay? And also, using a switching supply, it is not an isolated supply. Okay? Theoretically, part of the AC line does leak through the power adapter. Minute amount of energy, but it's still enough to cause the radio to lock up. So when you hook your scope onto the ground and try to get this radio to boot up, the radio will not boot up. You have to keep everything off the radio, boot it up, get it on and work, and then add your ground and your lead. Okay, your injection point or whatever. It's really a pain in the ass. Now, the vendor is still telling me, I told him he went back and changed his web pages. I watched him do it. Now he comes back, oh, I just changed the values. And I'm like, go away, stop lying, okay? I was going to come back and tell him, yeah, you sent me a radio that someone has shotgunned the front end by changing the parts, but also this part's bad. Now, after I changed that part, there still might be something wrong with the front end, okay? But this radio has been reworked and maybe repackaged and resold as a deal. I don't know. All I know is the soldering on these two chips is horrendous compared to the rest of the radio. All right, and of course, mysteriously, that's the area that seems to be bad. And I thought I had a processor problem with the signal, but I double checked it. I was getting so tired yesterday, I started making mistakes. Okay, but this morning I woke up, I laid in bed, and I said, okay, let me bypass the chip that I got to from two methods: going in with a signal to the antenna, following it down through, got to that chip, and then using a long wire from the mixer back to that chip. And then you see that the signal going in with the signal generator to say pin 15 isn't coming out on the other side of the chip. And it does have the right processor signal. It does have its B+. So the next option is to cut that chip out or get that chip out. And I'm going to take my time. I have to chisel away at it. I don't have the means to blow hot air in that small of an area to unsolder it. Okay, that's just the way it is at this point. And but I just want to update you. I stayed with it till it's been extremely painful. Yeah, I could have sent it back, but the guy has such a bad rating, and other people said they sent stuff back, and I don't want to make this any worse than it is. Okay, because the original price now, we've gone past that in time and aggravation. Okay, to send it back and have it get lost in the mail or have him resell it to somebody else, it's not worth it. Okay, but all this is you could tell it's a direct conversion radio too. When you tune it to the station, when you're dead on the station's clear. But if you go to either side, it starts to get like that, almost like regenerative. That's direct conversion. Okay, so this radio, has a front end that's switchable. It switches different frequency ranges using ferrite beads. So you got a front end filter that gets switched. You got an amplifier, and then it goes down and feeds to the mixer, which mixes it. And the mixer oscillator is very close to the received frequency, so it produces audio instead of 455 or something, an IF. And that's what direct conversion is. And I used to read about a DC receiver, and they used to call it a DC. The article I read, I kept reading it over when I was younger, and they never said direct conversion. They just kept saying a DC radio, a DC radio. And it was a buzzword. Okay, DC was a buzzword for direct conversion. All right. And but I have built them. I had, like I said, I had 700 videos up at one time, and I did direct conversions and explained them and that. And what happened? I started getting trolls, and I sort of understand all that now. There's people that have a desire to do videos, and they see yours, they get jealous, so they start messing with your brain. And there's mentally unstable people out there. You know, everybody's got quirks, but there's some real serious problems out there. And I started getting people complaining about the commercials on my videos, and I didn't know that YouTube just started putting commercials on my stuff. I didn't know. What did I know? I wasn't getting any money because I didn't monetize. Okay, I didn't. You know, I was just putting videos up there to be nice and to show people what I do, and then it became a problem, and I had to take it down. And I didn't understand what everybody was yelling at me for. You know, and they were using a back channel. It wasn't posting on YouTube somehow. So I don't know. I don't even know that. I never tried to contact anybody through YouTube. And the trolls know how to do this. Or they found my email address on my web page. I don't know, but I started getting these emails of people, you know, real serious, you lose your train of thought, blah, blah. Yeah, I said that. I'm almost 70 years old. I'm a few days away from being 70 years old. And it hasn't. It is what it is. And this radio is really hard. Okay? And thank God that guy, I think his name was Dan, gave me the schematic. And then I know I'm absolutely on the right spot. But when I was using the Russian one, it was a generalization. I had the idea of how this thing worked and what the chips did. But the actual file pin to pin, it's like when I thought the processor signal was wrong. To actually have the pin, and you actually touch the band switch on the touch screen, you actually see that signal go on and off, and that's to set the gates up. Like I explained in the last video, it's like a bunch of valves for water, and you put in a different code for each band, and the different valves turn and let the water go. Well, what was happening is one half of the radio, the water was going all the way through all these valves and shooting out in one spot. And then one of the valves, the wrong valve was opened looking for the water. And of course the water's coming out somewhere else, okay? Or going somewhere else. And that's just what's wrong with this radio. This little switcher, we shouldn't actually call it a switcher, call it a gate or a valve. Or let's see, what was called, they used to call rotary switch, okay? This rotary switch, because it's burnt out, it's in the wrong position. I also believe it's loading down the signal that's getting to it. So even though I did a bypass, I don't have as much signal as I should have because it's messed up. Also, this chip, if it's in the wrong position, the way that the diagram shows you, it also shorts out the signal. So in other words, one of the switches could be grounding out the main signal because it's wrong. Now, by taking this chip out and bypassing it, even if the processor's wrong, the radio should work on that band of 0 to 30 or 12 to 30. I think it's 0 to 13, 0 to 12 megacycles I'm working with. You know, but I have the basic idea of how this works. And with the right schematics, I closed in on it. But you know, you're so busy you don't think that a switching supply isn't an isolated supply. And you really shouldn't work on a radio without an isolated supply because the scope is actually a ground. So when you put a ground on this chassis, you're actually putting some AC component in through the radio. And that's if you've been around radios, you always want an isolated power supply when using the scope. And you know, I have to put signal in, and the signal generator requires a ground onto the thing, which is not an isolated ground. And if you'd known about Sony televisions didn't have a transformer in them. They were a bitch to work on because they didn't have an isolated ground. So you had to put an isolated ground on the Sony television set, an isolation transformer. And you know, I've had experience with all this stuff, but you know, this is tiny. I won't say the circuitry is new to me. You know, like I said, I worked with CD4066s, which were analog switch chips years ago, which basically did the same thing. You know, it is what it is at this point, but it's funny that that guy is pissed I gave him a bad review. But he's got a whole bunch of them. He'll get over it, you know. But this has been reworked. Whether he bought it not knowing, I don't know. You know, all I know is when I first opened this up and got the battery pack out, right away these two chips, someone's been in here, okay? And I'm not, I know what a bodged radio when I see it. So these have changed, so that's, I said, okay, there's a problem in the front end, obviously. And someone troubleshot this to a certain point. And this chip here is acting bad, so I bypassed it. But something could be causing this to be bad. And the way I can figure out what's wrong with that is that has to come out. And yeah, in the old days, unsolder, you do some readings, you put a new one in it, not with this stuff, you know. And a lot of people on YouTube, they have those heat tube things, or those heat pens. And I never got into surface mounts. I would buy the larger chip and work circuits. I like discrete components. And I did Arduino stuff, okay? So I've done the work, okay? It's just a matter of, I want to get away from this stuff, okay? It's very hard. It's very tiring. Every time you order something, you wait a week to get it. And it's not a fun hobby anymore. You know, just stuff. Look at the size of this thing. You know, and it's not a great radio. It's not like I'm fixing a Sony 2010 or an R71A. You know, this is basically the ham circuit. Ham radio guys built a lot of direct conversions. Go look it up. Very little circuitry. Well, they made multiple bands, so you got to have all those switching gates in there, or valves, whatever you want to call them, because they put all the bands in there. See, normally when you build a direct conversion, you maybe make it a 2-band, and you put a switch in there, and you switch between 2 bands. And all this is a tuned front end, an amplifier that's tuned with a coil, and then that feeds into your mixer. And then your mixer could be like a dual gated FET or something like that. It feeds the mixer, and then an oscillator. And then the oscillator is tuned very close to the incoming frequency, and out comes audio. Very funky audio too. Like I said, this makes a when you go off frequency. Okay, and that tells you right away it's not regenerative, it's direct conversion. I think that's it. All right, that's it.